I think irrigation was probably one of the major keys in the birth of civilization. Man had been a hunter and gatherer for thousands of years, and he even knew a little bit about farming. But at some point in history, he decides to settle down. And one of the areas he settled down in was Mesopotamia, and it had two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. One was in a very, very low riverbed and need to be brought up in order to serve the crops. The other one was a very wild and woolly river that flooded frequently. Now, you had two problems, but they weren't just an individual problem, they were a community problem. And the community had to band together in order to solve it. Civilization came basically as a result of this commitment to settle down and the need to solve the irrigation and the flood problem.
Even some of the ancient empires were linked to each other by trade. One of the most successful and famous trade routes, known as the Silk Road, connected China to the Middle East and the Mediterranean. A variety of products from silk to tea to precious stones, as well as ideas, traveled along this route.
Silk Road is a general term for all of the pathways that communicated between China and the outer world, in particular Central Asia, and then even further to the Middle East and eventually to Rome. And it's an essential innovation in Chinese history, that control over that corridor up into Central Asia, because it led to all sorts of cultural exchanges between China and Central Asia, China and India, China even and Europe.
Trade was a beneficial form of contact between people, but there were also wars. So while roads played a major role in the course of history, so did walls. In China, for example, the Great Wall that began as protection against attackers helped give China an identity as one nation.
There are several Great Walls of China. The first one was built around 221 BCE, or BC, by this man who's named Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of the Qin. Before he built that Great Wall, there actually had been many walls throughout North China. The various states that existed at the time had built their own walls to separate their territory off from other territories. When he unified the country, he tore down the ones that were separating states and built a longer one over the northern boundary of his territory to protect his state from nomads from Central Asia. That wall does not survive. We have some evidence about where it was, and there actually are a few spots where there are remains of it. But the wall that everybody knows about, the Great Wall that's visible from the moon, that was built during the Ming Dynasty in the 15th century. Historians think that essentially it did not play a major factor in protecting China from outside nomads, although it had a role as a symbol in Chinese history. This is the boundary between the civilized world and the uncivilized world. And so in Chinese minds, it's always been a symbol of the limits of China.
In 356 BC, Philip II became ruler of Macedon, a small kingdom in northern Greece. He conquered most of Greece and Thrace, but it would be Philip's son, Alexander, who succeeded him on the throne in 336 BC, who would really expand the empire.
Alexander is in his late teens, and he picks up his father's sword and goes on to conquer almost all of the known world, at least the Mediterranean world. He comes across into Asia Minor, he goes down into Egypt, he goes all through the Mesopotamian area, all the way out to the border of the Indus Valley.
Though Alexander died at the age of 33, he's remembered as Alexander the Great, perhaps the most famous conqueror of the ancient world. At about the same time Qin ruled China, another great empire, the Roman Republic, had become the dominant power in the central Mediterranean. Over the next 2 centuries, its control would spread east into Greece and Asia Minor, to Palestine and Egypt, and west into Europe. In 60 BC, a general named Julius Caesar would come to power and extend the Roman Empire all the way to Britain.
Julius Caesar is to the Romans possibly what Alexander was to the Greeks. He was a great conqueror. He was a brilliant military man. 5 major campaigns brought many peoples and cultures into the Roman fold. But in addition to that, he was both a social and a political reformer. In fact, his political reforms led to his death